started. I'm David York. I'm the technical project manager here, or at least one of them. So if you ever have questions about getting into that caseload or continuing to work on projects after you graduate, let me know. We can talk about that a little bit more. Yeah, so tonight is Monday guest speaker. So we have Chance Baldwin here with us. He has spoken a couple of times for us now, and sort of been connected with the program in a couple of different ways for a while now. He works at Coastal, sales engineer at Coastal. Pretty interesting job, and Coastal is effectively a consultancy that does a whole bunch of different things, but one of their big things is Salesforce and AI these days, and he's going to expound a little bit on AI. So yeah, really appreciate it. One real quick reminder, if you're not asking a question, please keep yourself muted. Just keeps things a little bit more orderly. If you have questions that you'd like to type, just throw them in the chat, and Chance or I will get to them at a good stopping point, but really appreciate you. I'll pass it over to you, Chance.
Awesome. Thanks, David. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Super excited to have the opportunity to present tonight. Before we get into the content, just a quick little expansion on about me. So as you all already heard, I'm a Kentucky native, live in Lexington from Allen County. I've been working in the Salesforce ecosystem for 4 years now. I started in the Salesforce ecosystem through an internship coming out of my time at college. So I went to the University of Kentucky. My background was actually in marketing and information communication technology, which is a fancy name for database management. That being said, consulting and Salesforce consulting especially was not something that was on the radar for me. It's been a really great opportunity for me in the tech space. And I know all of you all are excited and passionate about leveling up and growing careers in the tech space. So that being said, we do have internship programs that we run on a spring, fall, and summer basis. Those are focused on teaching you the Salesforce platform. You don't have to have prior knowledge about Salesforce to complete that internship. They do turn into full-time roles, myself as an example. And Salesforce has a vast array of products that they service. So a lot of people that are familiar with Salesforce may think of them as the sales and CRM company. As we're about to dive into, they also have an AI product called Agentforce that we'll walk through in a minute. On top of that, they have marketing solutions. They have industry-specific tailored solutions for companies that are in manufacturing, nonprofits, universities, and institutes of higher education. They have public sector solutions. They have healthcare and life science solutions. So all of that is to say, if you're interested in a specific industry, you have background in a specific industry, you're trying to look for a different or new opportunity in tech, would love to have a conversation with you. Don't hesitate to reach out, and I'm happy to give you some tools to get started learning Salesforce. If you come out of this today and you're interested in getting hands on keyboard, they do have plenty of free resources for training that you can get started with coming out of our conversation today. Before I dive into the content, I would just love to see in the chat, what is everyone's current comfortability with AI and using AI? And I'm going to say drop a 1 if you are someone that uses a ChatGPT or a Gemini or a Claude. Use a 2 if you're someone that is getting into the weeds of prompt engineering. You're trying to really perfect the output of AI, and give me a 3 if you're someone that's building agentic solutions where you're building a gym, you're building a GPT, you're building a third-party application that's leveraging an LLM. Would love to just kind of understand where everyone's at in the AI journey. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you all. That's super helpful. So hopefully this will be a really informational and introductory exposure to Salesforce's positioning on AI, but I will do my best to tie it back into the AI technology and framework outside of Salesforce. please feel free to drop questions in the chat, as David mentioned. And with that, I will go ahead and share my screen here. So we're going to walk through the framework and the content of Agentforce. Then we'll follow this up by getting in and looking behind the scenes at how this actually translates into a solution that I take to customers and show them and when they're interested in how to use AI for their company. Sound like a plan? All right. So jumping in, I want to talk about the Agentforce architecture. If you're new to Agentforce, as I just mentioned, it is their AI application. So when we think about an AI application, what does that mean? So an AI application is sitting on is a user interface. So think about a Gemini or a ChatGPT window where you're interacting with it, you're telling it to do something, you're asking a question, right? You wanted to give it an output. If we take that and put it into a box, that interface is then calling an LLM, right? So Agentforce is just another box, another window in a way for users to interact with an LLM, a large language model. So how does Agentforce work to call the LLM models? So before we go super deep into that, I think what's important for us to understand that there is a shift in how people operate with logic in the world of computer science. Historically, it's been deterministic, if then else, right? So we break processes down into clear steps and then figure out where we can have a machine or an automation take the human element out of it to expedite efficiency for people. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do with AI as well. But as you all know, AI is much more complex than just a simple if then else, right? And I would compare AI and the idea of an agent for Agentforce to a vending machine. And what I mean by that is when you have a vending machine, you have all of your different drinks, right, that are in the vending machine. You can pick Coke, you can pick Gatorade, you can pick water, you can pick sweet tea, whatever. And depending on what button the user presses, you're going to be dispensed a different drink. AI works very similar. You put in your prompt and then the machine, the vending machine, has to determine from the user input which drink it needs to dispense, right? What the output should be. And for AI with Salesforce, this is a combination of their data that's inside of Salesforce. This can be a combination of data that's in third-party systems. So for those of you that are familiar with common enterprise technology applications, we see a lot of customers that have enterprise resource planning systems or ERPs. We have point of sale systems, POSs. We have marketing automation. We may have third-party product information management systems. Think about Google Ads. Think about Google Ads. Think about enterprise data warehouses like a Snowflake or a Databricks or Google BigQuery, where key information lives. The agent's interacting with all of those different inputs, and it's reasoning through what information it needs to engage and extract to provide the best output. And what actually happens inside of Salesforce is when the user pushes the button on the vending machine, it's taking the information from these different repositories, right? These different sources of truth, and then it's feeding that in and encrypting it, but it's feeding that into an LLM model. So that could be an OpenAI model, that could be a Gemini model, that could be a Claude model, and we'll look at the different models they have in a little bit. But it's feeding it into a model that the user has selected, and then that LLM is interpreting that input, that user input, to then return the most performant output, right? So all this is to say the paradigm shift, we are no longer in the age of if then else. There is still a time and a place for that. We don't want to overcomplicate solutions. Sometimes when throwing AI at everything, you actually overcomplicate some of the low-hanging fruit, where if X then Y works, we talk to customers all the time where they're trying to put AI on an if X then Y, and we tell them you only need the if X then Y. And with AI, you're saying if X, then look at Y, Z, A, B, D, and hope that you get Y on the output, right? Based on what the person put in as X. So there's a balancing act that goes into it. But that being said, AI, as you all are aware, very powerful in reasoning and planning and adding efficiency for users. I will just add finally on this slide, a lot of what we do is working with building AI for the end user, meaning business users. So we are not doing a lot of implementing AI for developers, but there are a lot of applications and tools that, as you all are probably aware, exist to help with scripting, to help with engineering architecture, to help with data management, BI, machine learning. So there are those tools that exist, but we won't touch on that in detail today. All right, so the way that Agentforce figures out from all of those different sources of truth that we were just talking about, what it needs to look at, what it needs to send to the LLM to return a viable output is what they call the Atlas Reasoning Engine. And the Atlas Reasoning Engine, just think about it as effectively a CPU, right? So if you have a computer, you have a CPU, the CPU is the mastermind. It's orchestrating what needs to be routed from an information perspective and an action perspective to get the best outcome. So for Salesforce, their Atlas Reasoning Engine looks at which topics, which you can think about a topic as a certain, it's explicitly a set of instructions and context. So a pre-built prompt. So which topic should the agent be using? Again, what data should the agent be looking at? And then what tools should the agent be calling, if any? And we'll talk about the tools in a second that Salesforce has. But to expand on that, tools effectively could be automations that are not AI, non-AI automations. It could be integrations, or it could be, it could just be simple, notification, right? So those are some of the tools. And you can see here for Salesforce, we have Flow, Apex, APIs. For those of you who may not be familiar with what an API is, that's effectively a integration or communication channel between two different applications or sources of truth. Flow is Salesforce language for their native automation, the if then else automation, if you will. And then Apex is their custom syntax for code. And then before the output is provided, Atlas is going to reflect on the output that was returned from the LLM. It's going to score it, make sure that it is grounded properly, score it for toxicity. So trying to size for hallucinations and things of that nature before returning it. All right, and then just to kind of build on the Atlas Reasoning Engine, we have the concept of the React loop, right? So for AI and Agentforce specifically, the React loop is taking a step beyond AI input, AI output, but there are design frameworks that exist where the user says, for example, process return for order 1, 2, 3. The agent then says, well, to process the return, I need to find the order status. So then it may execute an automation or an API or Apex, and it may see, okay, the order status is fulfilled, and it was fulfilled, in this case, outside of the 30-day window. So then the agent is reflecting and saying, here are the parameters, here's the logic of what I can and can't do based on what the user has told me, or based on what the admin has told me. And then it reasons through what are alternative paths, right? Sometimes that path is, disqualification. Hey, I can't return this order. Here's the reason why. There's also the concept of kind of an AI fault, if you will, right? So an AI saying, I don't have enough information to answer this question, or this is not something that I'm permitted to do. Or in this case, if we've set up alternative paths for the AI to take, it may be able to reason through and say, can I suggest to the user that we offer a store credit? And that's where you keep the human in the loop, right? Because the agent in this situation is not acting on behalf of the human. It's not issuing a store credit to a customer, but it is calling out and reflecting and asking for human input to approve or move forward with other options, right? Whereas historically, when this was just a person thing, the human has to look at the order status for 1, 2, 3. They then need to evaluate and realize, okay, it's outside of the 30-day window. And then they also have to be trained and educated on what are the alternative paths that can be taken. So this is where AI looks to iterate, solve the problem through recursive cycles and add that efficiency back in. Now, I touched on this just a moment ago, but a big piece of Agentforce is security and trust. So Salesforce is the #1 CRM in the world. It's a multi-billion-dollar company, and they have billions of rows of confidential client data, right, inside of their instances for their customers. So when they introduced AI, they realized, as most companies were hyper focused on, the security risks that come with AI. And this is something that the Salesforce is very transparent about, and that is how their security works. So to walk you through this diagram here, the user puts in their prompt, they press the button on the vending machine, and then before we send it into the Atlas reasoning engine and we figure out what we're going to do with it, the information that is in the CRM or in the source of truth gets anonymized. And that protects the client and company from releasing confidential information that would be, passed through, potentially fed back into an LLM. And that PII gets masked, right? So the relevant CRM data gets anonymized. Then it passes it to that model, that LLM model. That could be OpenAI, Anthropic, like we discussed. Salesforce, their partnership agreements with these AI companies, these AI companies do not train their models on prompts that are passed through from Salesforce and Agentforce users. So it's in a separate stored instance where they're able to use the AI models, but the AI companies are not taking that information and using it to train and inform their models for future uses, which is another way that Salesforce is able to secure the confidentiality and privacy of their clients' data. Now, when this gets brought back, we have the grounding check, right? So this is where we were just talking about on scoring, looking at toxicity. Grounding is basically is making sure, is the output accurate? At this point in the grounding check, we've not actually brought back in the confidential information. We're just scoring the returned output from the LLM to say, did you give me what I needed? Or did you give me something that was not accurate or related to what I needed? Once Agentforce has made sure that the output is grounded, at that point, we demask the data and bring back in the actual values of the confidential information, and then we kick that back out to the user. Now, this all happens, in a matter of seconds. But behind the scenes, this is what is taking place. Any questions so far? I realize we jumped right into it, but I also know if everyone's at a 1, I want to make sure that if people do have questions or if we need to elaborate on anything, we can do that. Okay. I will take silence as we are all good. So Agentforce is the AI solution. And I talked about there are all of these different sources of truth that these companies may have. And a big part and a big challenge of having AI be performant is trying to take in structured and unstructured data and feed it in a organized way to AI so that it's able to access the appropriate library or repository or source of truth to complete its job. And that is where Salesforce has a product called Data Cloud that is designed explicitly for this. Now, I'm not going to go into extensive detail on how Data Cloud works, but for the purposes of this presentation, what you need to understand is that Agentforce sits inside of Salesforce, which means it has access to CRM data. So any of your data that's inside a CRM, you can interact with using Agentforce directly, right? It's a simple plug and play. For external sources of truth, such as companies that have call transcripts from Google Meet, for example, for companies that have product documentation, so PDFs, where if you have an agent that's customer facing and it's a support agent and someone asks a question about product documentation, those PDFs may be stored inside Data Cloud. Email history, so activity data, emails may be stored inside Data Cloud. And the value of Data Cloud is that it does not require you to duplicate and copy data in two places. So the data can remain in the source of truth while also being passed into this common, it's very similar to a master data management, but this common platform where data is being streamed in and then unified to say, here's all the information about John Smith, the customer, or order 1, 2, 3. And the agent can then crawl across and leverage that data to access third-party external information, not third-party information. You could use third-party information, but external information. And you can see here, we talk about the concept of identity resolution. This is to handle for situations where companies have John Smith in Salesforce, and they have John Smith in Snowflake, and they have John Smith in their ERP, and they need to make sure that if John Smith is spelled differently in one system, or if he has 2 emails for one system and a different email for another, or different phone numbers or whatever, that we're confident that we're talking to the right John Smith, right? So that's what the concept of identity resolution is, and how Data Cloud works to kind of unify that data into one picture across multiple different applications. And again, as this ties back to Agentforce, this is just an additional pathway and platform expansion so the agent can access data outside of CRM. To expand on that briefly, I know I just teased it, but we have the concept of zero copy. Is anyone here familiar with the concept of zero copy? Just give a thumbs up if you are. All right. So zero copy is a concept, and this is not Salesforce specific, but zero copy is a concept in the industry, which basically says, historically, if I had data in one system and I needed to access or see that data in another system, I had to copy it from system A into system B, which had a couple of ramifications. Number one, now you're having to make sure that the record is maintained in 2 systems. If you change something in system A, you need to make a decision, architecturally speaking, on do you need system B to update that record as well. Number 2, second ramification, is you're now paying for duplicative storage. So because you're duplicating the records, you're now having to pay for storage in both applications. And for a lot of these cloud softwares, that means that they're having to pay more to the software provider or the SaaS company to store John Smith's record in 2 places, right? So it adds an additional burden to companies. So the concept of zero copy is basically, we have John Smith inside of system A. We are no longer having to copy John Smith and system A into system B, but instead we are bringing that record of John Smith, making it accessible for any automation, any AI, any features in system B without duplicating the record. That's basically all it means. Is if we think about this, outside of kind of AI terms, I would compare this to something along the lines of trying to give a better analogy. Compare it to a concept along the lines of maybe like instead of having to pay for postage to send a letter back and forth, now you can just send a text message and you don't have to pay the cost. They get it instantly, and this text message is, from your phone. That's probably a poor example, but hopefully you all can kind of follow along with the concept of zero copy. So that being said, A huge value add for AI and Agentforce is that it can leverage zero copy architecture, which creates cost savings for customers and also allows the agent to continue to be performant and access more data than just what's in the CRM. All right. So we talked about the data. We talked about the process. We talked about the reasoning engine. Let's talk for a moment about the concept of RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. Now, has anyone, and give me another thumbs up if you have, has anyone heard of RAG? Is anyone familiar with that term being thrown around? Okay. So think about, oh, perfect. Good. Thanks, Jim. Think about RAG as an open book test, right? What this effectively means is that the AI does not have to be reliant on what it may have been trained on 3 years ago. Instead, it can retrieve the most recent data that is available to the AI. That's effectively what it means. And in the concept of Agentforce, this goes back to everything we were just discussing, right? So let's take the PDF example for product documentation for PDFs. Instead of having to train the model on your product documentation that may be changing because we might be inventing new products, we might be discontinuing products, I don't have to worry about keeping the LLM up to date on my products. Instead, I can just train the, or have the agent operate on LLM, and then I have a separate database or library with the product documentation that's being maintained. And then the agent just has to look at that library every time. So it's getting the most up-to-date information. And again, it grounds it in actual customer data, which reduces the likelihood of hallucinations. So it improves the output for the end user, is what that results in. Make sense? Awesome. All right. So getting into how do we build agents? How are they built? How does Salesforce let you set up AI? So inside of Salesforce, we have the concept of topics. And a topic, as we discussed earlier, is a set of instructions. It also includes some examples. It provides the context for what you need the AI to do. And that prompt, those instructions are what get fed to the LLM. And when we think about an AI application, we're anticipating that users are going to be doing this very similar things multiple times at scale, right? So to give you an example that we'll see here in a minute, we have the concept of a sales development representative agent. And a sales development representative agent, what they are doing is they're taking interested customers, prospects, as Salesforce calls them, and they are trying to send them emails. They're trying to warm them up so that they'll purchase from a business, right? So what we would do is we would create a topic that says, that may say like introductory, email or product alignment email. And what that is doing is we basically can turn on an agent and say, build out the parameters, but turn on an agent and say, if the customer has visited our website in the last 30 days, then we want to send them this product recommendation email if they visited website or web page A, C, or D, right? If a customer has clicked on one of our blogs that we've posted, we want to follow up and invite them to schedule a meeting with one of our salespeople. It's setting up systems like that that are going to grow exponentially at scale, where historically you'd have a team of people that are just, monitoring website traffic or inbound potential, prospects, and they're doing this in a manual way. So each topic is supposed to be aligned to a specific process that a user is needing to take. And then instead of having to have the user complete that process, they can kick off the agent to do it for them. Or in some situations, the agent can be turned on and be doing it autonomously in the background if the business so chooses. Now, inside of a topic, we have obviously a topic name, we have a description, We also have scope. So the important thing here is you don't want to duplicate topics for an agent because it will get confused because it uses that metadata to determine which topic it needs to complete, right? So if we had lead gen and then lead gen 2 below this, and the description and the scope were exactly the same, we have a risk of semantic overlap, which basically means that the agent is going to get confused and it may not be able to perform the correct action. So that's why we need to be explicit and refined in our processes that we build for AI. And this is not just true of Agentforce, but this is true of any type of agentic application that you're building, right? Now, when we get past setting the topic, we obviously, as you all are probably aware, have the concept of natural language, right? That's just your business user, your Joe Schmo going in and telling AI, here's what I need you to do. Historically, this would have been built with logic gates, the if then else framework. Now it's set up through agent instructions. And the beauty of this is that even on the back end inside of Agentforce, we don't have to develop the code and logic gates, but instead we can get really explicit and efficient with the instructions. And that may still allow, that ideally will allow for a user to start a conversation. But using the example we just discussed, if I need the agent to send an email to my gold tier members, for example, I can just have the agent, I can say, send an email to gold tier members. I don't have to define what gold tier members are. I don't have to define, the discounts or the offers or any of that context. As an end user, all I have to do is say, send, an email to gold tier members. And then on the back end, inside of the agent, the instructions, which are created with natural language, build out the rest of that detail and color. And the big value for this, when as someone that helps demo and implement this for customers, is that you rarely encounter a business where two people or more, but even at two people, are going to ask the same question or give the same action using the same words, right? And so we try and take as much potential room for human error out of the loop by making it as easy as possible for them to ask or give a simple command or ask a simple question, and then do all of the heavy lifting in the back end by saying, if you hear these keywords, use this topic. That's basically how natural language fits into the Agentforce piece. Okay. So you've put in your input, you've talked to the agent has called an LLM, it's given you an output. But for a lot of companies, it's not enough to just give me a draft of an email. It's not enough for the agent to give you a text blurb about what you should say or what you should recommend. Where you really unlock the efficiency is being able to execute following the agent output. And this is where we get into the different tools that Salesforce has available for developers and admins to be able to execute from an agent. So you can see here, the agent comes in, calls into Salesforce. We might have external systems with data that we bring in. And then depending on the topic and depending on the output, we can actually have the AI call flows, which are, again, the automations. That's the name for the Salesforce automations. So the if then else, if X then Y. We can have them call custom code, so Apex, for complex calculations or computations, or we can have them call the APIs. And Salesforce has a middleware product for integrations called MuleSoft. So when you see MuleSoft here, just know that is Salesforce's middleware product. This would work if you just had custom coded an API. If you were using an open API that was accessible, you could do this with any number of APIs. MuleSoft is just Salesforce's product offering that they have to set up integrations. The main takeaway here is that, and if any of you have read the MIT report that I think came out last year about the struggle of adopting enterprise agents and having successful releases of AI for enterprise companies, the biggest challenge is getting people to use it. And in my experience, one of the biggest reasons why people don't want to use it is because a couple reasons. Number one is because it doesn't get them to the finish line. It gets them 20% of the way there. And if they're only getting 20% of the way there, then they may as well just do the whole process, right? Because with AI, depending on how you ask the question, impacts the output. The other piece is people don't have trust in what the AI is doing and the output that it provides, right? So if you don't trust the data, you're not going to want to use the tool, which is what we see a lot. We talk to a lot of companies about what their data strategy is, because you can't, if you just put AI on top of bad data strategy, it's like putting lipstick on a pig, right? So we try and prevent that. So data strategy is a big piece. And those are two of the most prone areas for AI implementations and AI products to fail, are because we haven't brought people along for the ride and the data is not ready. And we haven't confirmed that we're giving a solution for a problem that people actually have. You saw this all the time back in 2022, 2023, where people were just building stuff left and right, and companies were racing to try and use AI. One of the biggest challenges was that people were developing AI solutions for problems that did not exist, right? So companies aren't interested in paying for something that doesn't actually solve a problem that they have. Just because AI can do it does not mean that AI should do it. And that's a big key component of this too. So we've already touched on this, but just to reiterate the SDR agent, this is one of the out of the box, like you can go buy the SDR agent from Salesforce, and this is effectively the workflow of what it's doing. So we already talked about this, but at 2 p.m., you have a lead that comes in and into the CRM. And the agent says, hey, there's a new lead that came in. At 2:01, the agent is kicked into action and it's qualifying it. It's looking through the CRM to see, have we encountered this person before? Do we have any lookalikes? You know, what's the best strategy here? At this point, we might be pulling in external data from other systems to see, were they in our marketing system? Were they in our ERP or anything like that, right? At 2:02, we're going to look to see, is the salesperson available to have a meeting with this lead? This is just one example. It could be an email, but in this case, is the rep available to have a meeting with this person? So it looks at the calendar and then says, yes, I can meet, Chance Baldwin can meet with Joe Schmo at 3 p.m. on Tuesday. And then by 2:05, where the agent is executing an action where it's sending the email to the customer to say, hey, Chance Baldwin is available to meet on Tuesday at whatever time. And at this point, we've taken the human out of that process, right? And this is just these are menial tasks that do not move the needle for companies, and a lot of the time, right? It's the grunt work that people are not necessarily excited to do. I don't know anyone that's excited to sit and monitor an email inbox all day and send out meeting requests, right? So that's where we try and push AI to automate. It's not to make the strategic decisions. It's not to put people out of a job. It's to try and save time on the low value or the low value, high effort tasks that people are having to do every day. And of course, with any good software or technology implementation, we want to tie everything back to a business metric or goal, which in this case is trying to scale pipeline generation without human intervention. Now, Agentforce also works on the customer support side. And this is another out-of-the-box example for Salesforce. So in this scenario, a customer, they might have logged onto a website to talk to a chat bot. They might have sent an email in. They might have submitted a case through a form on a website. But either way, the support query comes in. The agent is processing what the customer has said to figure out what's the problem that they're having. How can we resolve this? Is this something that needs to be escalated? Is it high priority? You know, that type of thing. Then we're using Data Cloud and retrieval augmented generation to look at, are there any answers that we have that we can give the customer, right? Can we solve their problem while they're here, before they step away? And based on that, the agent may be able to provide a response to the customer that solves their issue. And at that point, we've been able to, again, likely solve a low-hanging fruit that was not a high value add support ticket for a person to be involved with, because it was just where's my order at? Or can you answer this question about a product? But in the event that the agent can't handle it, or it is more complex, we can then route it directly to a person, right? So we get the customer to talking to another human to get their case resolved in a more efficient time frame, where they're less likely to be put on hold or have to wait for someone to follow up with them. And at the end of the day, the goal is that it decreases decreases resolution time for cases, and it keeps our customers happy. So CSAT, customer satisfaction score, is basically what that is. And it prioritizes us letting our employees focus on meaningful cases and customer interactions instead of having to deal with just sending 100 people a day their order status, right? So this is, again, also available out of the box. All right, we're almost done with the slides, and then we'll jump in and I'll show you a little bit behind the scenes on Agentforce. The last couple of things I want to touch on. So a big part of AI is testing and vetting it, right? You don't just want to build it and roll it out. That's horrible software implementation and development practices. So Salesforce and Agentforce have this concept of the Agentforce Testing Center and Observability. What this basically means is you have an agent that you've built, you have a topic or topics that you've built, and you are testing prompts and interactions at scale. So you may have one prompt that could be asked a handful of different ways, and the Agentforce Testing Center is asking it in all those different ways at 100 times, 1,000 times, right? To just look and see how is the AI going to respond. And then that confirms for the business, this is a reliable output. We can roll this agent out to the business. Or no, we realize that 20% of the time the agent says something that's completely wrong, or it hallucinates, or it's totally off base, and we need to continue developing and kind of refining the guardrails, if you will, of the agent. And then on the observability side, this is what allows IT professionals to see the actual interaction and conversations with the agent, so that we can always be looking to figure out what is it that the users are saying, what is it that the agent is saying back, and making sure that we're optimizing the agent, because this is an iterative process, right? We typically don't stop with version 1, but figuring out how we can improve the performance for users over time. All right. So in closing, no, that's a lot. In closing, the role of Agentforce is to try and help businesses and customers move from manual low-value task to automated low-value task, and letting people focus on high-value impact areas. From an IT perspective, it's this shift from lots of scripts, lots of complex declarative logic that is nested and requires and increases the latency for an output. And instead, we're becoming prompt engineers. We're becoming workforce orchestrators, where we're telling the agent where to look to get the right information, giving it the right prompt to get the right output for the end user. Now, if any of you all are interested, as we get ready to look at Agentforce and getting your hands on this, not only can you do this through its Trailhead, and I'll send this to David in a follow-up email, and he can share it with you all. Not only is Trailhead give you the ability to create a sandbox environment where you can implement Agentforce and play with it, but Salesforce also has a certification for AI specialists. They actually have retired the AI associate, so that's no longer relevant, but an AI specialist certification that you can take for Agentforce specifically. And there are no prerequisites for the certification. So even if you've never touched Salesforce, you can get this as a standalone certification to help your resume stand out in terms of AI exposure and competency. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to double check the chat, see if there were any questions that came up. Nope, no questions. If you have questions, perfect. All right, Bill. If you want to jump off mute, you can just you can ask it. You don't have to type it.
Okay. Is this basically meant for big businesses, or can it also apply to small or personal businesses as well?
Great question. So this application, this AI product, works for single, sole proprietorships, single employee businesses. It works for small businesses. It works for thousands of headcount enterprise companies. I know people that are in the ecosystem that implement this for nonprofits that have a team of 5 to help with grant management and responding to grants and proposals. Salesforce has customer success stories for companies like PepsiCo that are using this across their hundreds of locations and thousands of employees. So it can be used for all companies of all sizes. All right, great question. Jim, to answer your question, for deployments, where does Salesforce AI tend to provide the most immediate return on investment? So where I have seen most companies focusing to implement AI, because of the nature of what they do inside of Salesforce, it's usually sales focused or service focused. So they usually end up aligning an AI use case that's helping with getting more deals in the door or responding to support cases for customers like we just walked through in those 2 use cases. And that's a big reason why Salesforce has those solutions that are out of the box. You can buy it and turn it on and start to work with it. For more custom solutions, we have a client, for example, that's in the finance sector, and they're using Agentforce to help process credit loan applications. The credit loan applications are a formalized document, but based on the information that the person puts in when they're applying for a credit card or a loan, the agent processes that information and then assigns a score. Some people, they have a great credit score, they have great credit history, they can route them through and approve them immediately, right? That means that the customer is more happy, they're more likely to open up that line of credit. Other customers need manual human review. So for this custom solution, we're using the AI to score the forms that are being provided to figure out which ones need to have the human review and which ones should humans not be really concerned about looking at, and then having the agent respond to the customer for those. Great questions. Anybody else? Okay. Well, if you have more questions, keep dropping them in the chat. What I want to do with the few minutes we have remaining is I'd love to take you into Salesforce and show you an example of an AI agent. So let me do this. All right. So this is the environment that I use to demo out of to customers. And we, as I've already mentioned, have a lot of customers that are interested in AI. And one of the use cases that have been implemented, that I've implemented inside of this environment, is the concept of an account research agent. Now, for a lot of sellers, they spend hours every day trying to get the scoop on how they're going to break in to talk to a customer and have a conversation and figuring out what's that first email going to be, who do I need to call, the whole 9 yards, right? They spend hours doing it. It's very tedious. And if they don't get a deal out of it, then it's kind of a waste, right? So this solution uses Agentforce to automate some of that manual research across the web to then try and help them focus on selling instead of having to research. So you can see here, I have this account for Kroger, and all I have to do to kick off the account research report is I'm going to click on this little logo right here, and it opens up a conversation panel. This is effectively that input area that I was talking about with your ChatGPT or Gemini, right? And you can see the topics are actually going to showing up. I'm being given examples of things I should be asking the agent. So in this case, I'm going to say start an account research report. I can just click the button, or I could tell it, what I want you to do. Now this is being kicked off. It's running in the background. And just to quickly show you what is happening, because this is where we get into the toolkit. So once that's what the end user sees. What is happening in the background is there's a prompt for the agent that is being called. Let's actually type in the research. So there are a couple of prompts that we can leverage. So in this case, we're actually calling the research report generator. And if I open this up, this is where we would build out the topic. So this is a topic, this prompt is a topic that we can assign to the account research agent. The agent can have multiple topics. So you can see inside of here, what we've done is we've given instructions. We've been able, everything that is in blue is CRM or customer data. So we are enriching this with the record that the user is on. In the case we were just talking about, this would be Kroger, right? So this would be, you are an expert research analyst at Coastal, for example. I don't remember what I called this organization name, but Coastal. We write a detailed account research report for Kroger that equips everyone from quota carrying AEs to senior executives with the context they need for both long-term account strategy and near-term opportunity prep. And an opportunity is just a potential deal. And so you can see below this, we give explicit instructions on here's the content requirements, the order that they need to, that the report needs to be structured for displaying the information. So we have the overview, recent news, positioning and market landscape, and strategic priorities, technology stack, and then opportunities. From here, we tell it, hey, give us a summary table so that we have, again, ways that the seller can analyze it, ways that the executive can analyze it. And then we provide formatting guardrails, so how the output should look. And then finally, we have our source material. So this is where we ground it again and this is actually the output, but this is where we take the output returned from the AI and prepare for it to be returned back to the user in a way that is digestible to them. And then finally, number 5, where we have our guardrails or context of things that it should or shouldn't do when it's running the prompt. And then the final output just says return the complete HTML body on the report, nothing else, just to try and make it concise on what the output is. Here on the right-hand side, if I scroll down, you can see I can select my LLM. I can select the model. Now within Salesforce, they have standard models that you can choose from, which we've selected in this case. We're using GPT-5 right now. You can see I have a very long list of models I can choose from. Everything from Anthropic to OpenAI to Grok to Gemini to Amazon Nova. Or if I am a company that has built my own LLM, I have the concept of a bring your own LLM, and I can actually use my company's custom LLM to run this off of instead. So there's flexibility there as well. Now this prompt gets called and we start using the Swiss Army knife because what we actually do is we kick off the prompt calls and kicks off a flow. Now flow again is the automation that Salesforce has, and it's very declarative. But this right here, this Agentforce account research report creator flow, this is what's being called. So I'll open this up for a second and we won't go through every single step of this, but I just want you all to understand how some of these tools fit together to work to create a solution. And it's going to think because it's 6:57 on Monday for Salesforce, I guess. All right. And you can see here that this automation gets automatically launched from the prompt. So the prompt calls it off. That's the trigger. And then from here, it starts to assign variables that it needs to run through the automation. So we get the recipient ID, the notification ID, the associated account. If there's an existing account research report, we'll pull that in as well. And then we actually call Apex or custom code to help with the prompt and the execution for getting the research report created and feeding that information to, in this case, Perplexity is what we're using, but to the LLM. So in this particular scenario, we're actually using all of the tools on the Swiss Army knife, which is why I wanted to show this as an example, because the flow kicks off, we're calling custom code, and we actually are using Perplexity, which is an AI web search solution. And we're using an API from Perplexity so that the Apex calls to Perplexity, and then Perplexity does the heavy lifting of crawling the web and finding the information and returning it all. So we have all these Apex actions that run, and then the information gets fed back in. It gets summarized inside of the flow. And then, like we were just seeing in the prompt, we create the new research report record, and then the user gets notified, hey, your research report is done. You can take a look at it. Now, with that being said, with the minute we have left, let's jump back over here and let's look at our research report. So I add the notification, and this is our final output here. So you can see I have the account linked inside of Salesforce. I have my report summary. Everything has citations. So again, going back to that trust in the data and what the AI is saying, we can see what the report summary, why it says what it said. As I come down, I get the account overview, opportunity summary, and then I actually, because I ran a previous account research report, I have a comparison that takes place as well, which is a separate prompt and flow. But it says, here's what's changed since you ran the last report. So you can see here, since we last ran the report, there's a new CEO at Kroger, which would be really important for me as a seller to be aware of. So this is the final output. This allows me to then prepare for my next conversation with the customer, send my next email, or get a manager involved if I'm doing team selling or I need additional supervision. This is just one version of AI and Agentforce, but I know we're at time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So thank you all so much for letting me come and speak to you all this evening. If there are any final questions, I'm happy to stay on and answer those. But if not, I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of the night and a great week.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Chance. It's really great. Really appreciate you. Yeah, but again, if anybody has any questions, please let us know. If you think of something later too, you can also message me in Slack, and I can ask Chance later. So no problem.
Awesome. Thank you all. I really appreciate the participation and